How you doing there, kids? Gonna get back into some World War II here. Hopefully you had a chance to check out the ratings I gave you. They were kind of grisly and violent and nasty, but that's how war is. Remember, if you got captured by the Germans, you had about a 3% chance of dying in captivity. If you got captured by the Japanese, you don't even really want to talk about that. If you're lucky, they just kill you. All right, so anyway, let's look at the map here real quick. Actually, we're gonna look at the map for most of the thing. Got a bunch of game pieces here from one of my favorite strategy games ever, Axis and Allies, but I put it on my whiteboard because I thought it would pop a little bit more. And I usually don't mind drawing maps and stuff, so that's what we're looking at. Here's the Pacific Theater of Operations, just to orient you. Japan, right there. Hawaii's over here. United States would be off the map pretty far. This is the Aleutian Islands, part of Alaska. Actually, the Japanese took over a couple islands on the Aleutian Islands. Does that count? Did they take over the part of the United States? No. It wasn't a state yet, so it doesn't count. But, some of the last stuff we looked at was also Midway. We saw the Midway battle, and we looked at Guadalcanal. So Midway is basically the turning point in the Pacific campaign. Before that, we could hardly ever catch a break. We could hardly ever win. And after that, we could hardly ever lose. So down here is Australia. And these islands down here, the Solomon Islands, this is where Guadalcanal is. The Japanese are in there pretty strong. And United States forces go in and start pushing them out. And it's a pretty tough fight. But eventually, they do win out. There's a lot of naval confrontations there, and it's not really clear which side's going to win, but eventually the U.S. does come across and win. So really, as the war unfolds here, and very early in the war, they have to figure out how are we going to get Japan. We have to get these guys because they hurt us at Pearl Harbor, but how? I mean, can you get your battleships and everything, aircraft carriers and guys, and just go straight across the ocean, straight to Japan? Sure, a lot of people would have liked to do that, but you're walking into a near certain disaster. The Japanese Navy and Air Force are still way too powerful. Japan's very strong at this time, and that trek across the Pacific Ocean would not have gone very successfully. So they're not going to be able to do that. They're going to have to go a little bit more of a slow route and be a little bit more patient about it and wear down Japan's strength slowly over time. So there's basically two routes that they can go by. They can kind of come up through the South Pacific, through, this is New Guinea, this sort of big long island right here, and come up and then turn north and come up into Japan. Or they can go across the Central Pacific through here and also get Japan. General MacArthur for the Army wanted to go up this way. Come through New Guinea and up here and through the Philippine Islands and then go into Japan. And Admiral Nimitz from the Navy, the most powerful guy in the Navy pretty much, in charge of the Pacific Fleet at least, he wanted to come through here and through the Central Pacific and then raid into Japan that way, through here, and using these island chains to jump through. And you have to fight your way through all these islands too. They're all Japanese. This is all Japanese dominated up in here, you know? These guys are taken over by the Japanese. So what do you do if you're the president, President Roosevelt? You got to make a decision. And he decided, well, we're just going to do both. So what you saw essentially was the South Pacific route that came up here through the Philippines. That was mostly as more of an army operation with General MacArthur. And as they came up this way through the Central Pacific and used all these islands to jump through, that ended up being more of a Navy and Marine Corps. Oops, messed that up. Ended up being more of a Navy and Marine Corps operation going up through all these islands. So, of course, you know MacArthur, he got chased out of the Philippines, so he always had a chip on his shoulder about that. It might have been sort of personal for him that he wanted to come up through here and attack the Philippines. So as all this is happening, some of the things you read yesterday about the real nasty stuff the Japanese were doing, like resorting to cannibalism and stuff like that, as the U.S. Navy got more and more successful coming through here, they're not just jumping island to island, but some of them get skipped, and sometimes the supply lines get cut, and sometimes the Japanese aren't getting food and supplies anymore, and that's when you see some of that really bad stuff happening. But, you know, this ends up being more your army operation through here. There's some army guys out there. The Navy obviously is involved. It's not like they're out of it, but this is more directed by Admiral Nimitz and the Marine Corps generals as they came up through here. Throw these guys up here. And you got some pretty big battles, and we can't really do justice and hit all of them. But, you know, Tarawa, Saipan, Tinian, Truk, Batio. There's all kinds of battles up here in these island groups. Marianas, there's the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, where the U.S. naval aviators and their planes go out and shoot down basically the remnants of the Japanese naval air forces. The Guam's up here. And as we get closer and closer to Japan and invade closer and closer in, winning more and more, move up to the Philippines here. That was a tough fight as well. Now we can start putting bombers on some of these islands that are a bit closer to the Japanese mainland. All right, this is called the island hopping campaign. So they decided that they had to hop from island to island, and that was basically the best way to get at Japan, was to leapfrog through all these small Pacific islands. And when you take over an island in the Pacific, you don't just take over the land, you sort of take over the surrounding water around it, you know? So if you take over this island right here, this should be Iwo Jima, and you put planes on Iwo Jima on an airstrip, you don't just have the land, but for as far as you can fly planes around that island, you basically own that stretch of ocean too. So when you see the U.S. start to string all this together, we're doing a lot of, I guess, area denial, you could say, to the Japanese. In addition to us fighting in, the Japanese are also fighting the people of China, both Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist Chinese forces and communist forces under Mao Zedong. They hate each other, but they hate the Japanese more, so they have to fight the Japanese. And from India, they're facing pressure from the Brits. The Brits are coming through from India with also Indian troops, and going into Southeast Asia. This would be Southeast Asia along here in Vietnam and all those kind of countries. So here's our bombers coming in, and they're going to start bombing the Japanese cities and industry and slowly destroying Japan from within. All right, so that's our island hopping campaign. That's the goals of our island hopping campaign and how it happened. The next thing that we're really going to look at for a specific battle, and again, mind you, I am skipping over many battles, but we'll get Iwo Jima. And that's the next battle we'll look at in detail. It's kind of a legendary battle, especially for the Marine Corps, and we'll check that out. So that's all I have for tonight. Signing off. See you later. Mr. Powell.